Product provided by Nintendo. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is the last big release from Nintendo on their new hybrid console this year. While it has the Xenoblade series name attached to it, it's an isolated story that newcomers can jump right into while still experiencing the long, and I do mean very long, RPG that the series is known for. Let's see if it's worth picking up. In the world of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, humans called drivers bond with blades, these sentient-like human weapons. These people live on the planet Allrest, a world that's covered in a cloud sea with no actual land continents in sight. Instead, humanity and aliens live on giant creatures known as titans that literally have their own ecosystem both on and in themselves. Living inside the stomach of a giant animal sounds pretty nasty, but in reality, it's quite beautiful. Varying on the titan, they can have a giant rainforest or a mountain terrain inside of them. These titans provide giant worlds to explore with their own little creatures and towns on and inside of themselves. Sadly, as one would assume, when a titan dies, so does the civilizations living on it, as they collapse and become part of the Cloud Sea. As the amount of titans dwindles down over time, people start wars to control the last remaining pieces of land there is to live on. The world tree at the center of Allrest is said to be able to provide land for the rest of the civilizations, but is it fact or is it legend? Xenoblade Chronicles 2 has you play as Rex, a young boy who scavenges the bottom of the Cloud Ocean looking for treasures among the remains of lost civilizations. He's not incredibly smart or strong, but he has heart and has a very upbeat personality that reminds me of Sora from Kingdom Hearts. In fact, they're sort of dressed the same way too. One day Rex gets some contract work with some strangers that leads him to find Pyra, a sentient blade weapon that's being sought after by the strangers also on the job. These strangers, now villains, seek to use Pyra's powers for their own evil deeds, and Rex just isn't having it. Together, Pyra and him form a symbiotic bond as driver and blade to fight off these enemies. From there, the story follows Rex and Pyra trying to reach Elysium, this utopia that's said to be at the top of the world tree. It's not going to be easy though, as enemies come left and right seeking Pyra's powers that lead to the unraveling of the story. You end up learning more about Pyra's powers, the politics of the civilizations living on different titans, and just more about the bigger world you've been living in. The over 70-hour story will take you through emotional, heartwarming, and action-packed scenes filled with characters with a wide range of personalities. It's a fantastic story with plenty of reveals and twists sprinkled throughout the game that, although it has its fair use of anime and JRPG cliches, it's a great story regardless that'll keep you engaged throughout the entire adventure. The game isn't just 70 plus hours for the sake of being a long game, there's definitely reasons and story backing it up. Gamers who skipped out on Xenoblade Chronicles on the Wii and X on the Wii U have nothing to worry about, as this game is pretty much isolated from other entries outside of a few references. You're perfectly fine playing Xenoblade Chronicles 2 as your first Xenoblade game. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is a crazy JRPG with layers and layers of depth along with giant open worlds to explore. I want to focus on the combat first just because I think those will be the mechanics most will have questions about, especially if they haven't played Xenoblade Chronicles 2 before. At first glance, one might expect Xenoblade Chronicles 2's combat to be sluggish and boring. I mean, you're just standing there as the game auto-attacks, right? Well, it's true, but it's much more complicated than that. Jumping into a battle is almost like an investment. You're building up the battle for big finishers rather than just focusing on hacking and slashing until the health bar reaches 0. The biggest change from previous combat systems is now the game will only auto-attack when you're standing still. This means if you want to reposition yourself for a dodge or an attack on a vulnerable spot, you'll have to give up your auto combo attack to move around. That's just the start of this tactical battle system. Forgive me if I start to sound insane a bit as I try to explain it all. As you begin fighting an enemy, your auto attack will begin when you stand still. Varying on the blade you're using, which is indicated by the bottom left of the screen, the auto attack will have a different rhythm to it. 3 quick slashes or 3 elongated swings, for example. At the end of an auto attack, you're supposed to use one of the indicated skills at the bottom right of the screen mapped to each of the face buttons on the Switch. These skills refill as you auto attack, as indicated by those little pink lines on the edges of their icon. Each skill has a side effect too, like leaving an enemy with the status effect or dropping an HP potion. The skill all the way to the right with the Roman numeral is your special. Your special refills as you perform skills or arts, and it ranges from a power level of 1 to 4. So while it may look like you're just standing there as the game does all the work, you're timing your skills with auto attacks, seeing the movement of your enemy and how you should position yourself. Keep in mind you're also occasionally reviving an ally, collecting potions, switching blades, and monitoring the combos at your disposal. There's more layers in there though, like having your skills be more effective if you use them on a third auto attack rather than the first one. There's also using a certain element blade against an enemy weak against said element, or forming chain attacks or combos. Combos are started when you use your special and it gets whatever element your blade currently is. At the top right you'll see a tree diagram of possible elemental combos. From time to time your allies will chime in with requests to do their own special, adding into the tree diagram of combos. At the rightmost part of the diagram is the finishing move, and you can follow the list of elements to see which path leads to which finisher. Performing these moves help out the chain attacks that are back from previous entries in the series. It sounds rather complicated, I'm sure, but these are just the few basic layers of the combat system. Luckily, it's not all thrown at you at once. The game will slowly introduce new mechanics over time, even adding in new elements 70 hours into the game. There's plenty of features that keep being added to the game that keep the game feeling fresh up to its endgame. Outside of the main story quest, there's plenty of side missions that involve you going after certain creatures, collecting a type of item, or doing jobs around the city. Being an integral part of the city, like helping out with side quests or buying things from the local economy, will help you develop the city. As the city starts to develop, shop owners will start carrying more types of an item at a cheaper wholesale price, so the game does actually reward you for taking your time with the game and going out of the main objective from time to time. Now, with any good RPG, you have your leveling and management system. Each character here has their own upgrade panel where you can unlock buffs for each of their art skills and the character's stats. You can also equip accessories that do anything from increasing your character's health to raising their strength. Blades can also get upgrades, or rather be customized. Core chips can modify blades to increase their base stats, things like the auto attack amount and the chance of blocking an attack. You can create new blades by using core crystals to forge new bonds in blades, whether it's for Rex or for an ally. Varying on the core crystal you use, some more common blades will forge rather than the more rare ones. On the other hand, if you use something like a rare crystal, there's a higher chance you'll get a more unique blade or at least a stronger version of a common blade. Side note, this could have easily been a loot box system, but instead it's free and randomized. Take that as you will. Anyway, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 lets you fine-tune your characters and allies to your liking. With enough customization, you can completely change or alter the type of character your ally is, turning attackers into healers or tanks into attackers. It really does let you make your team your very own team. The open worlds are breathtaking, but their large sizes can be a drawback too. You see, the navigation system is sort of a pain. It consists of a simple compass that tells you the direction of an objective. But since the worlds can have multiple layers vertically, it can be a bit difficult to know where you need to go. This leads to long periods of searching for an objective despite having a compass and a map that literally points you in the direction of the objective. Luckily, the large terrains are filled with things to do and enemies to fight, but better navigation would have been appreciated. When it comes to visuals, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is a bit of a mess. At points it can be completely astonishing that this game is even running on the Switch. The size of the worlds, and most importantly, the life in those worlds are pretty incredible to see, whether you're playing on a 1080p 50-inch TV or on the go on the Switch's 6-inch 720p display. It isn't just a big world that's empty, there's life and ecosystems in each of the titans, and you can quite literally stare at a pack of enemies as they go hunting or drink water from a nearby meadow. While you can only have 3 people in your party, they can each have a corresponding blade that follows them around the map. As you can imagine, it can be pretty taxing on the Switch, and it definitely is apparent. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 looks like it targets 720p 30 frames per second, but it's not perfect. The resolution is dynamic and fluctuates according to the situation. In dock mode it stays closer to 720p, but not always. The real eyesore though is when you play it in handheld mode. Originally I thought the UI would be my main complaint in terms of handheld mode, but surprisingly it looks fine on the Switch display. Instead, the resolution is my problem. It can pretty much sit at 480p for long periods of time. Some things do show up in 720p like the main menu when you press start, but as you go back to the gameplay, it quickly drops in resolution as soon as you get into any action. The frame rate isn't flawless either. While the game targets 30 frames per second, even with the dynamic resolution dropping as low as 480p, the game will still drop a couple of frames here and there, making it run at the mid-20s. Sometimes the game will take a bit to catch up with itself when it's loading. For example, when you fast travel to a completely different titan, when you spawn you'll see a textureless world at times as they play catch up with the rest of the game. It completely takes you out of the experience. It's something not normally seen in a Nintendo game where polish is their bread and butter. The thing I think the game nails the most in visuals are the character models and the cutscenes. While this game is pretty long, a good chunk of its length are the animated cutscenes that honestly I don't mind being as long as they are because they're so beautifully crafted. The character models, despite being mostly flat in facial structure, still convey emotions and expressions really well. It's odd because the more detailed 3D model character faces look odd to me now. The Xenoblade series has always been known for its music, and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is no different. The game's music is beautifully orchestrated. It comes from the composer Yasunori Mitsuda, who worked on previous entries in the series as well as other RPG icons like Chrono Trigger. There seems to be the perfect track for every occasion. When I would battle common enemies in the open world and then jump into a boss fight, the battle music would accordingly kick up and get me pumped up for a fight. Likewise, when I would jump into bed and play in handheld mode for a few hours at night, just working on developing towns, the music would become more nice and peaceful, very calming-like. Voice acting will be hit or miss depending on the player. Some of my friends like the English cast, some of them don't. I'm on the side of don't. A lot of the cast are pretty good voice actors, I just feel like they didn't fit the theme of the characters they were playing. Rex in particular just didn't seem to have the emotion or momentum that the character was meant to have. I chose to play 90% of my playthrough with the Japanese voice acting add-on that's free on the eShop, and I enjoyed it much more than the English voice cast. With that said, there are still technical issues with the voice acting, like lip sync being off at times, though it definitely is improved if you play with the Japanese dialogue. The sound mixing can also be a bit off at times. Varying on the cutscene or the text scene, sometimes the characters' voices can get drowned out if you have the audio set to default. Luckily, you can alter the mix manually by going into the game's options and tweaking it to your liking.
東に150もずれてるなんてありえないだろ。で、どうじゃったお宝の具合は。見立て通りだったのか Expectations.
It seemed pretty solid. Didn't even have to reinforce it too much. Even with the labor costs, we should be able to turn a decent profit.
Honestly, it takes you 2 days to run the structural analysis.
HD Rumble is also used throughout the game, and it sounds out well with its use during combat. QuickTime events and fighting sequences where you use a special work really well in conjunction with the visuals on display. For the most part, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is a masterpiece of a JRPG that's sadly held back to some degree because of the technical issues throughout the game. None of the technical drawbacks ruin the game for me by any means, but at times they can definitely be so jarring that they sort of take you out of the experience. Imagine being so pulled in by the open world and life surrounding it, only to fast travel to another tie-in and have all the textures missing for a few seconds. The same can be said when playing in handheld mode and being in the middle of an intense boss fight to the point where the Switch has to drop the resolution down to 480p to keep up with the action. It's jarring at times, but the excitement and fun of Xenoblade Chronicles shines through it, even in the darkest of times. Despite its technical drawbacks, I think Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is a worthy sequel to Xenoblade Chronicles and a game you should definitely pick up whether it's your third time playing a Xenoblade game or your first time. That does it for my review of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 for the Nintendo Switch. Sorry it wasn't as in-depth as I usually go or would have liked. I'm kinda strict on time right now because of school and college finals, so I really should have been doing work while I was doing YouTube reviews instead, so hopefully it's still useful and enjoyable at least. If you do have any questions about the game though, feel free to ask me in the comment section down below, and also be sure to drop me a follow on Snapchat as I'm trying to be more interactive on there, and I recently did a Q&A, so you may have missed that if you're not following me on Snapchat already. As always, thank you all very much for watching, hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you all in the next one.